G1s of all walks of life, welcome to CinemAttack, the film culture show on ScrewAttack.com. This week we've got our reviews of The Lone Ranger, Max's recommendations, and some more superhero movie news. I would like to point out that this is our 10th episode. I think it's been 10 great episodes, and of course none of it would be possible without our show's creator, Larry, so let's give him a hand. Hey Max?
Yeah?
Where's Larry?
Oh, what is it? He said he's like flapping doodles or something.
How dare he walk away from this show? The nerve!
Didn't you just leave for a whole month?
Silence!
Look, we'll handle it on our own. No worries. We'll just have to abandon the trailer segment. Again. Just start the episode.
No, if Larry's not here, I don't see why I should be doing anything. You can cue the intro if it's so important to you.
No. You've read the handbook by now, Sean. I can't. You're the host. You start us up.
Well, that's just too bad.
Well, if I can't do it and you're too much of a stubborn dick to, I guess we're at a stalemate, Sean. Unless, you can find somebody with more affiliation with ScrewAttack and film than us. But who's that gonna be, Sean? Who are you gonna pull out of sleeve this one, you dick?
Hey guys, I'm Ben and you're watching CinemAttack.
Scared, aren't you? You should be.
These two have a hard time staying dead.
The Lone Ranger is the new Disney Western from the director and producer of Pirates of the Caribbean, starring Johnny Depp and Armie Hammer. After a pretty big delay, it finally came out a few days ago to less than stellar reviews. However, I love the Pirates of the Caribbean films, so I went in pretty neutral. And that's pretty much how I left.
John Reed has always been the justice comes first pacifist next to his brother Dan, a Texas Ranger. While on the hunt for an outlaw in the South, the brothers, along with a group of other officers, are ambushed and all slain, one by one. However, John miraculously survives, and along with his Native American sidekick Tonto, he vows to avenge his brother's death and take down his killer.
The Lone Ranger is a very well-made movie production-wise. The cinematography is very good. There are a lot of sweeping shots of the West that really impressed me, but enough color was used that it didn't become an unpleasant Wild Wild West, which is something a lot of Westerns kind of miss with me. The audio design is also top-notch. I loved all the sounds of the gunfire, the trains, just horses' footsteps. It all created a really nice atmosphere, of course with the help of Hans Zimmer's always great scoring.
The one thing the Lone Ranger does very, very well is it uses one of the principles of great filmmaking: show, don't tell. Rather than the dialogue explaining everything, the lines set up information to be presented, and the film presents that information in some way, shape, or form. For example, there's one conversation in which a character reveals a hint about her past. The camera then tilts up to a nearby painting of a ballerina, letting viewers put two and two together. Moments like these are frequent, and it's a great sign that the people behind this film, at the very least, know what they're doing.
The action in The Lone Ranger is excellent. It's just high-flying, stunt-filled, ridiculous set-piece after high-flying, stunt-filled, ridiculous set-piece. It really is a joy to watch these scenes, because they keep adding things new and it keeps it fresh. And actually, there were fewer action scenes than I expected, which was nice.
Another thing that works well is the acting.
The Lone Ranger himself is pretty good. I was afraid it was going to be, generic white guy Indiana Jones wannabe number a billion, let's be honest here, but Armie Hammer actually put some life into the character.
People forget this, but Armie Hammer is a really good actor, and he brings his A-game to the role of John Reed, the straight man, a no-nonsense servant of the law.
I was rooting for him, and he had he actually felt concerned about the things going on around him. He had a level of awareness that is missing in a lot of big action stars, who instead opt for cool disinterest.
But Mr. Hammer isn't the guy everybody's upset about, is he? Yes, it would have been best to have a Native American actor play Tonto just for the sake of consistency, but just in defense, Johnny Depp does a pretty good job with the role. He may just be a Jack Sparrow variant, but he gets the job done, and I honestly thought a lot of his lines were pretty damn funny.
But what surprised me was that he was given a really good motive. It's a nice mix of revenge and redemption, and there were actually a few moments that I legitimately felt sorry for him, which is not something I expected for a mostly comedic character.
The rest of the cast holds up, and overall, it's a well-acted piece. The Lone Ranger is a very weird film. Weirdly paced, weirdly told, and weirdly structured. But most of all, its narrative is just weird in general. A lot of the scenes have only a hint of relevancy in conjunction with the rest of the plot, making the film far longer than it needs to be. Seriously, you could cut this movie down by like an hour and it wouldn't confuse anybody.
I really loved the idea of the narrative being structured around an old Tonto telling this story to a young boy. The execution wasn't the best, they cut back and forth a few too many times for my taste, and they kind of abused this setup to get over some plot holes, but overall, treating the Lone Ranger like, a legend of the Old West is really smart because it is. They acknowledge that, yeah, it's a tall tale, and that helped me get into it more. You don't know how much happened and how much didn't happen, so if you see something over the top or goofy, you just kind of accept it as embellishment over time. It was pretty smart.
But here's the thing about film. It's not just about how good the parts are, it's about how they fit together, and The Lone Ranger just doesn't fit. It's a disjointed and jumbled mess of a film.
It moves pretty well, and it works. I mean, it didn't do anything that really upset me in any way, but there were minor things that they either weren't explained, or they weren't fleshed out, or they just fell completely flat. I can't really do examples, but these things kept popping up, and all I could think was, what was the point of that?
I had a very hard time following the second half of the movie because there was far too much going on. Or at least too much unfocused stuff going on. Multiple events are happening at once and they aren't given the amount of explanation needed to make them anything more than tangential. The movie also fails to be much about anything. It touches on some ideas here and there, but there's no consistent theme. No real message it tries to convey. All of this leads to the conclusion that The Lone Ranger is simply not worth it. It may have solid performances and a better understanding of visual storytelling more than other blockbusters this year, but that does not save it from being an incoherent pile of weird ideas and flawed infrastructure.
The thing that struck me most about it, though, was its sense of identity. Its identity was very clear. It's a fun popcorn movie, and it knew that. In fact, it felt uncomfortable in even its most basic drama scene. I always got the feeling that it just wanted to play. Like a puppy. And like a puppy, it's big, dumb, and clumsy, but it's also impossible to get mad at. The Lone Ranger gets a 5 out of 10.
The Lone Ranger gets 2 silver stars out of 5.
Gather around, boys and girls, because it's time for the segment that only covers a single story once every 2 weeks, yet is still infinitely more respectable than TMZ. This is the CinemAttack Newsreel. This week we are once again talking about superhero movies. Sorry about that, but nothing else is really worth reporting. With Man of Steel grossing over $500 million worldwide and still going strong, it is indisputably a big success, so obviously a sequel will be coming soon. Much sooner than you'd think, in fact. The Wall Street Journal reports that Warner Brothers is putting Man of Steel 2 on the fast track, hoping to release in 2014. You heard me, 2014. Next year. Pre-production has not even begun yet, but they plan to release an epic superhero action film in 1 year. Moving on. In the same piece, the Wall Street Journal also claims that the 2015 release date for the Justice League film still stands. However, actor Christian Bale recently confirmed that he will not be doing another Batman film, saying, "We were incredibly fortunate to make 3. That's enough. Let's not get greedy." He goes on to say that, "I have no knowledge, no information about anything. I've literally not had a conversation with a living soul in regards to the Justice League film." In other words, he's completely finished playing Batman. To add even more chaos into the mix, Christopher Nolan, the producer of Man of Steel and director of the Dark Knight trilogy, left the DC Cinematic Universe a few months ago to work on his own projects, shortly after being rumored to be put in charge of all DC films. So what does all of this mean? Well, it means that Warner Brothers is in a lot of trouble. First, rushing out Man of Steel, in this report's opinion, is absolute suicide, especially given how weak the original already was. They will also have to reboot Batman since both Bale and Nolan are gone, a reboot that will have to come out before Justice League in 2015. On that note, how are they going to handle the other Justice League members? Are they all going to get their own movies between now and 2015? What I'm getting at is that this is one giant mess. But why is it this way? Why doesn't Warner Brothers just wait for Marvel to do their 3 phases, then step in to fill the void? The only answer is the simplest one. Warner Brothers does not have faith in the superhero genre. Why else would they rush out all of these movies? Trying to compete with Avengers 2 can't be the only reason. No, the executives at DC and or Warner Brothers do not see this trend lasting much longer. And honestly, who can blame them? This year alone, we have the release of Iron Man 3, Thor the Dark World, The Wolverine, Man of Steel, Kick-Ass 2, heck, even Despicable Me 2. For now, audiences are more than happy with all these superhero movies, but how long will that last? Warner Brothers apparently thinks it will end in 2015, because they refuse to push their biggest movie back an inch, despite it probably being the best call. What do you think? Has the box office become saturated with too many superhero flicks? Will people stop going in the near future? Are you already sick of them? Let us know in the comments below. This has been the CinemAttack Newsreel.
Happy July, everybody, and welcome to another round of Recommendation Domination. This time, we're making things shorter with 4 movies, 2 from the past and 2 for the future. Whether or not this change is permanent is based on what the boss man thinks when he returns. So what are we waiting for? Let's do it! So, this episode's subject material is an origin story based on a TV show and released over the 4th of July weekend. 11 years ago, I went to see a movie that had those exact same traits, and I enjoyed it a hell of a lot more than The Lone Ranger. My childhood takes center stage as I talk about the cinematic treatment of my all-time favorite television show, the Powerpuff Girls movie. Oh, hell yes. The excellent writing, the beautiful visuals, the way it establishes all of the tropes associated with the series, the Powerpuff Girls movie fires on all cylinders and never holds back. The movie is never afraid to go dark, and I mean pretty damn dark. It deals with societal acceptance and parental guilt and... This movie is so freaking awesome. Now, the only thing that could get in the way of you watching this underappreciated animated classic is that you can't really find it anywhere, DVD or streaming. Walking out of The Lone Ranger, I was, more than anything else, weirded out. Seriously, that movie is weird, and the last time I had a reaction like that was when I watched a little indie film called John Dies at the End. You'd have to pay me to attempt to give a synopsis of this movie. It's so strange and out of place that it has a look entirely of its own. It sort of falls apart in the 3rd act, and the visual effects are blatantly rudimentary, but it's definitely worth the time of anyone looking for something different from the cinematic norm. But unlike the Powerpuff Girls movie, you can find John Dies at the End on Netflix streaming watch instantly, as of July 4th, 2013. My 2 entries for the future both come out during the hot days of August. The first is the sequel to a movie I found extremely enjoyable back in 2010. And if its scrapped subtitle is any indication, it's gonna be some balls to the wall. It's Kick-Ass 2. It doesn't take much to convince me that this movie is one to look out for. Crazy violence, crazy plot, and the crazy actor Jim Carrey as one of the main characters. While Matthew Vaughn will sadly not be returning to the director's chair, he handpicked his replacement, Jeff Wadlow, and served as one of the producers, so I'm not really that worried. There's not really much else to say about this one. It looks very promising and I can't wait to check it out when it releases on August 16th. The other August entry to look out for is one built entirely on star power. If you were one of the millions of people who enjoyed Shaun of the Dead and or Hot Fuzz, there's no reason you shouldn't be looking forward to The World's End. Simon Pegg and Nick Frost return for the final installment in the Cornetto trilogy, as a couple of childhood friends reunited in their attempt to complete a pub crawl they couldn't finish in their teens. But apparently the town they grew up in has changed, as in now it's inhabited by robots bent on ending humanity. The mix of comedy and action is always welcomed, and the premise is quite unique. I don't think I've ever watched a movie about pub crawls, so I'm looking forward to understanding its appeal. But the real reason I'm so pumped is because of the film's director, Edgar Wright. Mr. Wright is one of those directors that has a very clear idea of what he's best at as a director, and I can't wait to see his latest directorial job when The World's End hits the States on August 23rd. Well, that's all for recommendations this week, my friends. Thanks for watching, and remember, the best films you'll ever see, you may not have seen just yet.
Sadly, it's time to say farewell once again, my fellow moviegoers. Be sure to tune in next week, though, as we finally tackle the highly anticipated Pacific Rim. I'm really interested to see this one. So until then, I'm Sean.
And I'm still Side Smash.
And we've now taken over the show. See you next time.